We're going to be doing multiple choice when given a graph, writing the equation for this lesson. One thing that you want to note is the past couple lessons we haven't been doing reflections, but this lesson there are some reflections again. So when you have all your information, we've gone over midline, going through the middle of your graph. We've gone over amplitude, distance of midline to maximum, and then B, the frequency being period, found by the period. So B, we know is 2 pi divided by the period. For sine, we're always looking at that high peak to low peak shape. If it is reflected and it goes low peak to high peak, then your A becomes negative. Same thing with cosine. You're looking for the U shape, but if you have an upside down U, then your A would become negative as well. So in this first example, which equation represents the graph shown below? First thing, I know that all these options are giving me sine, so I know that first of all. I'm going to look at my y-intercept being at -8. That's the midline. These all have a midline of -8, so there's nothing to do there. I'm going to look at if it's reflected or not, and you can see from the y-intercept it goes high peak to low peak. This is low peak to high peak. Usually sine graphs go high peak to low peak, so since it's opposite, we're looking for an A that is a negative. So I can cross out these first two examples. And then I need to determine my B because that's the only difference between these final two examples. So I'm going to look at, I know that B is 2 pi divided by the period. And my period to get the cycle went from 0 to 200. So 2 pi divided by 200, divide top and bottom by 2, we get pi over 100. So I can see that this third option is my final answer. For the next one, I need to determine if I'm doing cosine or sine. And so looking at my graph, I have my y-intercept right in the middle of my graph, so I know that it's my sine function, not my cosine, so I can cross out the two cosine options. They both have a midline of 200 and amplitude of 250, so I need to figure out which B works with my graph. So looking at my graph, my period to get my sine shape was 800. So to find my B, I'm going to do 2 pi divided by the period of 800. Top and bottom is divisible by 2, so pi over 400, and I get the second option. And then two more examples. This one, they're all sines, so I can't cross anything out that says cosine. I'm going to first figure out if I want it to be reflected or not reflected. Usually sine is high to low peak. My graph right here, starting at the y-intercept, goes low peak to high peak. So I know that my A is supposed to be negative, so I can cross out the options that are not negative. And now I need to figure out which frequency works. Do I want pi over 100 or pi over 200? So I'm going to do my B formula. 2 pi divided by the period. My period took me for one full cycle, 200. Top and bottom are divisible by 2, so we get pi over 100. So this first option is our answer. And then the last example, I know that they're all cosine because I don't have any other option. So I'm going to look at what I have. Starting at the y-intercept, I have an upside down U. So that tells me that it has to be a negative amplitude, but they also all have negative amplitudes. So that doesn't cross anything out. I'm going to find the midline. I have a minimum of 100, a maximum of 700. So a total length of 600. So I'm going to go up 300. The middle of my graph is right at 400. So I know that I can cross out these 300 options for the midline. I'm going to find the amplitude now going from midline to high peak. 400 to 700 gives me my 300. Both of these options have my 300s. So all I need to do left is find the B, the frequency, using the period. So I'm going to do 2 pi divided by my period. Looking at this upside down U shape, it took me from 0 to 200 to get there. Top and bottom are divisible by 2, so I have pi over 100. So this second one has my correct frequency.